Hey, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of Book It or Release. You're here with me, Chris Gassar, and my co-host Ray Negron,
Yo,
and and if you remember, our first episode was a tribute to our employer Peter Fish and our friend. So before we get into our history as far as where we've come up professionally, Ray actually went to Peter's memorial here in New York. And so, Ray, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about it and who you ran into and how it made you feel.
yeah, it was kind of surreal. Seeing people I haven't seen in a lot of years. It was very nice, well intended. It was at a nice boathouse in Brooklyn at Prospect Park. Um, I saw a lot of old faces from National that I haven't seen in a long time. Jennifer Fish was there. His fiance Tracy was there, but she was busy. She was definitely trying to handle everyone that was coming to her with the condolences. Some awesome people gave great speeches about Peter's life, which was great. Um, it felt right to do it in New York. It felt right to give it to New York, especially that he moved to LA. Everything was going so great. Coming back to New York felt right. People that were there were nice. Again, there was some people I didn't know because his last 7 years or 8 years, he had a new life. I wasn't part of that everyday life. So I could only, speak to what I know, what I was part of. And bottom line, it was good to see the people that I saw. It was good to see them. It was a good memorial. It was well put. People said some kind stuff about Peter and the genuine heart that he always showed us. I guess it just came full circle. Part of me selfishly felt that the tonic uh storyline was left out, but that was selfishly. That had nothing to do. Everything else was perfect. Everything else was great. It was good to see Ed Campbell. It was good to see Chaz Menendez. It was good to see Leon Naravian. It was good to see Brian Beatrice was there. It's
Wow.
always good to see those guys. Even one of our hires at Tonic, Brian Bonifacio was there. He's, in the game. He's real good. And, it was good to see these people. It was sad to see them in that light, but it was actually sort of a good full circle to see a lot of people still in the business. A lot of people aren't. Um, I felt kind of out of place for a little bit, but I always told you that I felt within our time and I've always felt out of place.
Hmm.
But I definitely, Jennifer Fish is always great. She introduced me to to Peter's fiance's kids that Peter called his own. Very sweet, very nice. They had awesome stories to say. Some of it that correlated to the way we knew him. He always had inappropriate jokes at the inappropriate times. But he would do anything for anyone, especially if he had a space for them in his heart. So
Yeah.
that was a good thing overall. Uh, and I left with a good feeling that he did it right. He left with a lot of people loving him, and that's how it should be.
Yeah.
I
And
think
he'll
that's
certainly be missed.
yeah, absolutely. Look, even Ron Harris. I saw Ron.
Oh, wow.
Ron Harris was there. And if there's ever one guy in the business that's constantly always trying to figure it out, as long as he's been in the business, Ron Harris is that guy, man. Still giving out his card. Hey, give me a call. We can figure it out. Hey, buddy, we can do it. The
Yeah.
sweetest guy.
Oh,
And
totally.
yeah, so sweet to this day, man. He's still, he obviously looks a little bit older,
Sure.
but then I think about it, we were kids.
Totally. I mean, I was in my early 20s.
Yeah, no, so was I. So to think about it, damn. I mean, it was nice to see. It was well put. It was really nice. Me personally, like I said, I felt out of place, but I've always felt out of place. I felt that the tonic stuff was left out a little bit, but you know what? I have it, so I'm
Yeah.
good with it.
Yeah.
what we're gonna do here, I'm good with that. What we're gonna accomplish as we go along. This was a new start, and you know what? At the end, I was happy. I left, and I felt a good feeling that it was good to feel how I felt. I didn't have to really hide it, and I said hello. I gave my condolences, and after I said hello to everybody, I stood to the end and I left, and then that was it. And it
Yeah,
was very nice. It was good to see certain people. So, you know, uh,
that's awesome.
I
I
don't.
wish I was free to go there, but I was
No,
visiting with in-laws that weekend and wasn't around. But
listen, life
um,
takes its course, right? Everything happens for a reason, and I think it was whoever was able to be there or whoever wasn't there was there definitely knowing that it was going on.
yeah,
And you know what? We're gonna go ahead and as a tribute to the whole national sound, because we got to be specific, national sound and what he was and what he gave to it and what he gave to us and where we took us. We'll continue to build that up, and we'll always remember Peter, and we'll be good with it.
yeah,
Good
and
stuff.
he'll
And
always be one of those guys that gave us our start for the most part.
bottom line is, I think we'll always reference to him, right? Our goal is to do something different, give the industry a look inside, a growth of what this business has done. And a lot of it for us started with Peter. So I
Yeah,
think he's always going to be rest. So, rest in peace to him. You know, my condolences always to Tracy, to the people that loved him, because there was a lot of people there. There was a few people that spoke of him that I never really met in the time that I was with Peter personally throughout that whole time. That
yeah,
I never met. I knew they lived and they knew, but I'd never met. But that being said, you know, now we move on and we go and we took our break. Now I think it's time to blow this podcast out the water and do what we got to do.
cool. Well, that being said, so let's get into what we were going to have our intended to have our first episode be, which basically is a brief history of us and what we've done in our careers for the past 20 something years. I guess I'll start if you don't mind.
No, I think you should. I think you should.
So, so in high school, I had the idea of wanting to write music for film and TV, and so uh, I graduated high school and I went to University of the Arts in Philadelphia. It's a conservatory art school, and I majored in music composition and music education, with also a fallback of being a music teacher if the music thing didn't work out. Went to school there for 2 years and then decided to transfer to Montclair State University, where I just focused on music composition. Graduated there, and then a week after graduation, I felt that if I wanted to write for music for film and TV, that I should be in LA. So I literally packed everything up and a week after graduation moved to LA. Um, Believe it or not, trying to get into the music business isn't as easy as it looks.
Can't even.
Yeah, right.
I can't even imagine.
Go figure. So while I was out there, I was, went to a temp agency, ended up working at an advertising agency, and I lasted about 6 months in LA. I was like, I don't know. I think I need to start looking to get back to New York. And so while I was in LA, I started putting out resumes, and I sent a resume to National Video Center, and I got a call from Gary Chester, who is owner of the Edison Studio, which was a kind of one of the departments of National Video Center, where Gary ran a huge studio in the Edison Hotel. He did music for films and TV, and with full orchestras and stuff like that. And so when I got a call from them once they got my resume, I was like super excited. I flew to New York for an interview, got the interview with Gary, and he hired me on the spot. So then I fly back to LA, pack up all my stuff, drive in my car with my buddy from LA to New Jersey in 2.5 days. It took longer than 2.5 days. My wheel fell off in the Grand Canyon. Long story short, So, had to spend a week in Flagstaff, Arizona. We'll cover that another time. Anyway, get to New York and started working at the Edison, where I was literally cleaning toilets, making coffee for the musicians, doing orchestra setups, preparing the wiring and the mics and things like that. And I loved it. It was awesome. But then I heard of an opening at another division of National Video Center called National Sound for a production coordinator. And so I applied for that, interviewed for it, got it. And so after 2 weeks at the Edison, I started working at National Sound for Peter Fish and Jen Fish, where I was a production coordinator.
Who interviewed you for the production coordinator?
That was Karen Corelli. And so I was a production coordinator, I guess, for maybe a year and a half, where then I eventually became an assistant engineer, where I was doing like the bulk of my work was editing CBS radio promos for the CBS morning shows and 60 Minutes and the nightly news with what was his name? Dan Rather. Thank you. And to date myself, I was literally cutting 1/4-inch tape, editing the stuff. Yeah. Yep. Making dubs and doing edits for MTV, things like that. So after 2.5 years of being at National Sound, like a lot of the people before me, kind of graduated and moved on to CBS News. CBS, as you know, Ray, was one of our biggest clients, if not the biggest client at National Sound. So Jeff Kreiner
is the marketing and promotion division.
Yeah, exactly. So Jeff Kreiner, who was the head of that department at CBS, knew me, liked me, and with the blessing and help of Peter and Jen, after 2 years, I moved on to CBS News Advertising and Promotion, where I was working on promos again for 60 Minutes, nightly news with Dan Rather, CBS hours. Morning News, 48 hours, all those.
And just to put on that point, I'm getting Jeff Kreiner on this podcast, just so you know.
That would be awesome.
I am getting him on.
I'd love to know if he remembers me.
Jeff has a file, man. Jeff has a file. It's not a computer file. He has one of those old school files in his, never working for CBS, but working with Jeff Kreiner directly.
Yeah.
The man is just, the dude is awesome. He's got a brain. He's very talented.
Oh my God.
I can't even imagine while you working with him at CBS. Mind you, I heard horror stories of him.
Oh, yeah. Plenty of those.
I heard horror stories, but aside from that, tremendous man. Tremendous, very, and I'm going to put it my way, a good dude.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Yeah, I enjoyed my time working for him. I enjoyed working for him as a production coordinator at National Sound, even though very demanding, and God forbid you asked who it was on the phone when he called, you had to know his voice.
I used to say, it's some guy from CBS calling on purpose. Again, we'll get into that some other time, but the shit that I do that nobody else would do, that's the shit I would do, especially if Jay Pednoff would call, because he was the head producer for 48 Hours.
Right.
Mary Felder. And when Susan Sorensky will call, because Susan was the head of the CBS, she produces 60 Minutes, she produces all that. It's very rare when she called, but when she did, then everybody straightened up.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so, you have to.
So continue.
Okay, so I think I spent only about 5-6 months at CBS when I had the opportunity to go into advertising. I was offered a position as the only audio producer for McCann Erickson. So I decided to make the jump, went to McCann Erickson as their audio producer, where I did all radio production for all their clients. And some of them were Gateway Computers, Sprint. Oh my God, it was so long ago that I'm blanking on what the clients were. Anyway, I was there for about a year. And then I had the opportunity to work for a audio production company called Mikhail Barone, located in Union Square. and it was owned by Chris McHale and Joe Barone, and one of the greatest jobs I ever had. I was hired there as an executive producer, and I and they did everything from mix to picture to original music to full up radio production to script writing. So if it involved anything audio, they handled it, and both Chris and Joe were masters at it. Like, to this day, I still think Joe is like the Martin Scorsese of radio production. The dude is brilliant, and Chris is just like so talented when it comes to music and just being a creative mind. I can't tell you how much I learned from both of those guys, and I learned my work ethic from Jill Cheris, who was the manager of the facility.
Uh,
Um, so
And to put a point on that as well, obviously I developed a relationship with Chris McHale
mhm,
on the side, which, we know that he's going to come on this as well.
yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
hope
we,
so.
we know that, we
Yeah,
know that for a fact. We spoke to him. He's excited. A big mind, a big, vast mind, as you say, that his
his
mind,
history is deep.
yeah, is deep, and he sees the world out of a different lens.
He certainly does.
And
Yep.
it's important to listen to what he has, because I listen to a lot of the stuff that he says.
Yeah.
So, that I can't even imagine. I almost worked at Mikhail Barone after they split up, where it was
Oh,
just,
no kidding.
yeah, I almost, that's how our friendship became. That's how we developed the friendship.
Oh, okay.
That, but again, continue. But it's just
Okay.
the little points that we cross paths. I guess this is the point of it, right?
Yeah.
Step you took, even though we separated at national, now we have a timeline.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
a timeline, and there's little branches that go off where we connected without even talking to each other.
So, as you just touched on, I was at Mikhail Barone for 6.5 years, and the Chris and Joe decided that they couldn't work with each other anymore, and so they split. And Chris took ownership of the company. And while this was happening, I actually got a phone call from one of our clients, uh, who we worked with all the time. Probably the biggest client at Mikhail Barone was the advertising agency BBDO. And I worked with a bunch of the producers over there. And Ronnie Vaz, who is the head of the music audio department, said, "Hey, I understand what's going down over there. Would you like to come and work at BBDO?" And I was like, Ronnie, thanks. I've worked at an advertising agency before and I didn't love it. So
Right.
I'm going to pass. But thank you. She called me a week later. She's like, "Just checking in. Wanted to see if you may have changed your mind." I'm like, "Well, Ronnie, you know, maybe, because at this point, like things were looking kind of bleak
Right.
at the new studio. And I was like, there's a certain amount of money I want. And she's like, "Let me see what I could do." She called me back like an hour later. She's like, "I can get you the money you want." I'm like, "Oh God." You're making it difficult.
But it's meant to be. It's meant to be.
Yeah. So it's like, all right, I'll sign on. Here I come. And so went from Mikhail Barone to BBDO, where I was the audio producer for all of BBDO, not just BBDO New York, but I also worked for BBDO Atlanta, Chicago, LA. I did consulting for BBDO Dubai. And so any client that did any sort of audio work came through me. And so I was at BBDO for 14 and a half years, produced over 4,000 radio spots by the time I was done. And then COVID hit, and the BBDO had no choice. The first rule in marketing and advertising is, uh, or I should say, the first rule in any sort of business is, if there's a recession, you stop all advertising. So, as you can imagine, BBDO took a massive hit from all of their clients not doing any work
Right.
due to the COVID and the recession. And so I thought I was in the clear after hearing, a bunch of people getting laid off. And then all of a sudden, I get a call from HR, which I have never spoken with HR in my 14 years at BBDO. Not even when I was hired did I ever hear from HR.
Wow.
And now all of a sudden they're calling me like, Chris, we need to talk to you. And I turn to my wife. I'm like, oh man, this is it. Sure enough. Um, but again, they were super professional. They were
Yeah,
very
of course.
sympathetic and empathetic towards my situation. And in the end, I was number 100 of 101 people that they had to lay off.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that was in May of 2020. So after that happened, I was fortunate enough to get a freelance job where I've been doing video editing for a kosher food company out of Bayonne. They needed somebody to handle all of their video editing for their online videos. And I've done, I think to date, 50, 60 videos for them. I've done video shoots for them. Um, and so I've just been lucky. That's just been maintaining me for the past year and change. But in the meantime, I've been going on interviews, and which we'll get into probably on the next episode. But that's where I'm currently at, is just doing freelance work and going on interviews and seeing where my career goes next.
Yeah, I think. Listen, as impressive as all that sounds, what I could vouch for, obviously, is the connection that we've had. It's been a weird one, right?
Yeah.
We met briefly at National. I guess this leads me into saying, my history. It just flows in, and it's very easy, and it's very simple. It's nothing glam. It's nothing crazy. It wasn't your road. I was working. I did not go to school. I was not a school person. I made it out of high school. I said I'm just going to go to work. I went to work at 125th Street in Harlem at a boiler company, uh, where the owners were super great, super awesome. But I always had a thing with, since a young kid. I worked at RKO Video. I worked at my family's video store. I worked at Blockbuster Video. Movies was always a thing for me. I was the only kid in the projects with a laser disc player. You know, not knowing what editing was, I created a short snippet of Sean Penn's State of Grace. I don't know. So he's a cop, goes back to Lower East Side. He's part of the Irish mobs. I created a 30-second intro of Sean Penn with In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins, where I did it with the laser disc, a VHS tape, and a color square TV.
Yeah.
Did it for my boys. My boys were like, "You're crazy. How the hell do you do this?" Knowing nothing, right?
Yeah.
Knowing nothing. But I always loved movies. I always loved TV. I could watch it for hours. My boss at Oswald encouraged me, "Hey, why don't you go do what you like?" I was like, "Cool." I got a job at HBO out of left field.
Hmm.
Just got a job, went, started working in the shipping department. 2 months in the shipping department, I didn't last very long. Someone asked me to work at the fulfillment department at HBO. This is the brand new studio on 23rd Street. Then a friend of mine that worked at MTV gives me a call out the blue. We were from the same neighborhood. She tells me, "Hey, they're looking for a night operations manager at National Video." Now, at this time, I think it was Kim Caffiero that was running the video side of things. I spoke to her. She goes, "Oh, let me see. We spoke. Everything went well." She calls me back. She goes, "I don't think it's going to work out for you at the video side, but I know the audio side is looking for a night operations manager." I was like, "Okay." She introduces me to Lisa McKenna. I interviewed for the position, bullshitted my way throughout the whole process, knowing nothing. Bothered her for like 3 weeks, because back in those days, you were encouraged to call and find out what it was, like, "Hey, what's going on?" Just
Yeah.
haven't gotten a call, whatever. I guess I was such a pain in the ass that I broke Lisa McKenna down. And I got the job. as a night operations manager, knowing nothing. Next thing I know, I just became of National Sound. You know, that's where you and I met briefly before you left.
Yeah.
I started, mind you, everything I learned at National Sound. Everything from how you speak to clients, how you speak to the people you work with, how you know, everything I learned on the job. I stood there until Peter and Jennifer walked out. You know, so I was there 2.5 years, maybe 3. I think I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm gonna say 2.5 years before they walked out. They split up their business partnership with National Video, and I was part of that damage, collateral damage. It was nothing personal, you know. There was some great people that worked there: Veronica Sheehan, Donna Greco, Ron Harris. You know, it goes on. Barry Gliner, all these people that were just great, and the people that worked in the tape room were great. They all editors now. They
Yeah.
all they've been in the business. They like you said, they graduated from National. Eventually I felt like I was part of National, even though I still felt out of place. You know, I wasn't the norm, you know.
Yeah.
But I caught on. I caught on really quick, and I got it. I was starting to see out of a different window, out of a different lens, what this could be. Next thing I know, you know, we left National. Peter goes, "Don't worry about it." So I didn't worry, not knowing what that meant. I was maybe home for a week before I get a call from Peter. He goes, "Hey, you're going to go to PBS, to Channel 13. I'm like, "PBS? What am I going to do there?" He goes, "Don't worry about it. You're going to meet with the director. He's going to tell you where he's going to put you, and, you know, whatever." Okay. So they put me in duplication. Duplication, I was just scheduling duplications, getting all the concerns, making sure the dubs got right, got out. I was maybe at PBS for 6 months. So this was contract work. This is where I started understanding what freelance was a contract world, and all that stuff was at PBS. Turns out Peter had an idea to totally split off on his own and create his own post house facility, which he did.
Okay.
At this point, Jennifer and him were not together. They had separated. Uh, you know, and the place was called Cool Beans to start. This was on 42nd and Madison. Literally. So we went from 42nd and 10th Avenue all the way to 42nd and Madison.
Was that the Gray Bar building?
Across the street from the Gray Bar.
Oh, okay.
Across the street. So, you know, so we were there 2001. I just happened to, you know, I was with my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, was pregnant. My daughter came along in April. We were there for maybe 2 months. And then things changed. You know, a lot of people came towards Peter. People that were at National Sound businesses went with Peter. A&E, Nickelodeon, MTV,
CBS.
CBS, of course,
Yeah.
CBS, because that relationship, I didn't understand the relationship between CBS and National Sound being with Peter. I didn't understand it until maybe my final year at National, you know, that second year, and then understanding it even more when we took Cool Beans. Cool Beans was audio division of Multi Video Group, which was Rhinoceros Editorial. Very well-known editorial house at the time. Mind you, we were going to the agency side of the world. Even though we were doing broadcast, the idea of going here was going to introduce us and give us both worlds, broadcast and agency, which was totally, again, I'm learning still on the fly as I go along.
Yeah.
You know, I became the supervisor of scheduling, even though we didn't have titles when we got into Cool Beans. Cool Beans became Tonic. A year, 6 months of us being there. We changed it to Tonic. Tonic became this thing, and it just blew up. You know, we took some of the engineers with us, homegrown engineers, you know, that had been with us since National. And I became the scheduling supervisor, operations manager. Lisa was the director of operations in a sense. So I was right under her. it was seamless between her and I. The same power she had, I had. Well, they allowed me to make those decisions as it was needed to be made,
Right.
and it was great. But I think I got my bones at Tonic, learning the business a lot more than it was just booking a session, recording a VO, then all this stuff. It was a lot more than that. Uh, and we lasted there for 8 years. I walked out of at this point, Peter had left because he dissolved his partnership with Multivideo and he went back to Howard Schwartz. Uh, and Lisa had gotten an opportunity to work with Callahan Creative. She was a producer for Jeff Kreiner for a lot of his stuff. She was a big political producer. She had a lot of the big senators, Hillary Clinton and all. So she would do a massive amount of stuff. Very talented person, very talented. So she had an opportunity to go work for her. So this is the first time I'm by myself. Already, 9 years doing it. Now I'm standing by myself, having to compete with Peter Fish now that he has left Tonic.
Right.
To keep some of these people. And mind you, I was able to keep some of those people. Surprised as hell. So now I no longer was now I'm the guy that's running the show. But now I'm responsible. I didn't know the pressures of being a director of operations or a person that had to run everything from soup to nuts. I just learned on the fly and I stumbled a lot. I had a vision in my head that, what, I could work from home. I didn't have to come into the city. I could do everything from the phone. I could do, because video was becoming a thing there. And then I quickly learned that's not the way it was supposed to go.
Mm-hmm.
But the way you felt about your time at Mikel Barone, my time at Tonic was priceless. I've always searched for that again and never found it. But leaving Tonic was one of the hardest things I ever did because I left. I literally quit.
Wow.
Because we had Multivideo was going through their struggles because the landscape of the business has changed. A lot of the agencies were creating their own post houses, internal houses. So slowly but surely, now you weren't competing with the client. You weren't competing with other post houses. Now you were beginning to compete with your own clients.
Right. Yeah. A lot of agencies have been building their own in-house stuff.
Correct. Yep. Right. So bottom line is Rhinoceros was struggling just as much at this point. I think I lasted maybe a year and a half running it. And then we reached out to a company in West Virginia called Studio Center, which I literally worked for them just for a month.
Mm-hmm.
It was the worst experience I ever had in my life.
Wow. Oh, geez.
The worst. Because I was so green. I didn't know a lot of things. I was too naive. I was too naive not knowing the business because I reached out to Studio Center. That was where my guilt.
And at this point, you're like 13 years into your career.
At this point, actually, I think I was exactly 13 or 15 years in already.
Yeah.
I was already into that mix. But I still didn't know, since I always had Lisa, I always had Peter. They took care of the business side. I just had to make sure operations ran. When the clients were in the building, that was my responsibility. The clients, right? Making sure they got what they needed, making sure the editors knew what they had to do, making sure that that every audio engineer knew what their job was going to be the next day, making sure I knew the deadlines, what they needed. I needed to make sure every bit of detail had to get addressed. And there was no failing at that. Because, Peter being a composer, sometimes Peter put himself in a pickle, and without us, he would create a bigger situation. I always give this story where he sent CNBC, CBS's music, and he sent CBS's music to CM. All
Ooh.
because Peter refused to have the CDQ seed,
Oh God.
and we fought about it. Now, mind you, not a lot of people fought with Peter,
Yeah.
right? Once Peter said something, it was what it was. We moved on because he was the owner, he was the boss, he was the guy that signed the checks. I argued with him and argued hard. Like it wasn't just Peter, we need to do this. It was he was like, no, we're behind. We got to get it out. I don't care. That's the right one. Let's go. And I'm like, no. Okay. Sent it out. We get a call an hour later.
Oh God.
What music is this?
Oh.
Okay. So, typical me, I was quick to tell people when they were wrong. I didn't have since I was so comfortable with Peter and Lisa, I was able to be myself even when I shouldn't have, right? There should be a level of not I can't say respect, a level of approach to any situation. And sometimes the approach shouldn't be you fucked up to your own boss, right?
Sometimes that's appropriate though.
No, absolutely. But not every time you think something, it should be. All right.
Yeah,
so
fair
be
enough.
it. Studio Center came in. I think I lasted a month till February, January, February. I walked out February 8th, 2008. I remember the day. I walked out. I punched the wall.
Ooh.
It was so bad. And I'm going to tell you why it was bad. After leaving, it was the worst thing I could have done after I learned what I learned how to deal with business. You never let anybody get under you like that. You never let the personal side get to you. If you want to protect people, it's better for you to be in the game. You can't do nothing the moment you're out. And I always felt the guilt and the responsibility of 10 other people that wasn't myself. These were good people. These were people that trusted me. Now, mind you, most of these people are all good now. They some of them work in LA. They're big audio engineers. Some of them are in New York, audio engineers, and they continue in the business. And they're great at what they do. Some of them are still friends to this day, But I felt responsible for them. And it was the worst time of my life, Like I didn't even give Studio Center a chance. Maybe if I would have given it a chance, maybe I would have been able to soften the blow of a lot of changes. Maybe I would have been able to learn a little bit more. But I didn't have that sense at that time. My biggest regret to this day. But I was there for that. And then I walked away from the business for a couple of years. I did nothing. I did nothing at all. Then I started getting calls. Hey, do you want to freelance? Do you want to, as a project manager, come in, help us out? Sure. So I bounced around several places, contract with, and then I went to work at Post Perfect at the time. I worked at Eastside Audio for a time. All this in a couple of years span. So now I'm reaching 16 years in the business, and I'm taking a back seat, not taking an actual position I should be taking.
So what years is Post Perfect and Eastside Audio? I'm just wondering if we crossed paths and didn't even know it during that time.
We probably did. I think we did.
Did David Browning, did he work with you at one of those facilities?
David Browning worked with me at National Sound,
right?
And I think for a brief moment at Post Perfect.
Okay, because there was when I was working, Eastside I believe
Audio. Let me be specific. At Eastside Audio, he was an audio engineer.
Because there was a point, I forget if I was at McCann Erickson or BBDO, I can't remember, but I remember I had to do a project at Eastside, and sure enough, my engineer, I walk in, is David Browning. I'm like, oh my goodness. And the last time I worked with him was at National.
Right. So briefly,
so you may have been a manager there at that point.
So I was a scheduler also at Eastside Audio, and a in-house producer, as they called it, right? Because now we were dealing with tons of agencies. So the approach of the title was different. you know, that being said, I bounced around that. I think I lasted, a couple of years in each, but then I kept moving on because I kept looking for Tonic or National.
Yeah.
I kept looking for that sense of people wanting to do good together, and I couldn't find it. And I also wasn't given the ability to create that atmosphere. All right. So I just kept on. And then from there, I started working at NBC with Donna Greco. We ran into each other unfortunately, at a wake, at a memorial service. And so lo and behold, Ron Harris and Donna Greco walk up to me. First thing out of Ron's mouth is, "Hey, kid, what are you doing?" My wife is behind me. Donna Greco comes with her, polite, "Ray, how are you? So good to see you." My wife goes, "You need to get him back to what he's loved." My wife says it. My wife doesn't say anything, right? She was like, Donna Greco goes, "We'll make it work. We'll figure something out."
Damn.
Maybe 6 months passed by. I think nothing of it. I'm helping a friend out around where I live, running operations for. He has a contract with FedEx as a FedEx ground, so I'm helping him run the day-to-day operations. Okay, brings me on. We help do whatever, and then I get a call from Donna. "Ray, I want you to come to NBC with me." Well, she's already worked there for a period of time. Get there, I last there for maybe 2 years. It was under a contract, and the contracts for NBC were a year long. And if you stood longer, you had to leave for 3 months and then come back. That's how they worked or whatever. But luckily, I think I stood a year and a half without having to do that. And it was, I enjoyed NBC because it was different. It was totally video. It was just mentoring associate producers, how not to panic in situations, how, this is my first experience watching an in-house facility try to run a post office.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything, politics plays a big game in those big corporate places. You can't run off like you would in a post house and do what you need to get done. You have to go through process and approvals and all that stuff. But I did enjoy it. I did get the love back for it, where now I became a producer. Now I was producing. Oh my God. In the year and a half that I was there, I gotta be honest with you, we were doing versioning for USA, TNT, and Sci-Fi Channel. The Expanse, tons of shows, versioning tons of cross promotions with shows that crossed or whatever, making sure they were edited correctly, make sure they were put. I think I did over 1,600 spots, maybe more, because it was weekly. You had to do you had to do 5 different versions for each spot. From a 30, you had to do a cut down, 15, 10, 5. You had to do it with different tags in the bottom, different times, reruns, episodes, brand new, not new. And it was fun for me. I was really I actually I submitted my first spot as an associate producer was for Superman.
Oh, neat.
Because Sci-Fi would give a rundown of movies. And a lot of these young kids, yeah, they knew what Superman was, but it wasn't the Christopher Reeves version. Right?
Right.
It wasn't that. It was like Man of Steel had been out already and all that stuff. So I did my first spot, and it was nerve-wracking because it was strictly a 30-second spot. How to get something together. Luckily, I had this awesome editor by the name of Rich Stewart. We did it together. Like, I can't take the full credit for it. I only knew what I remember of Superman, the first one especially.
Yeah.
Right. But it felt fun again. I love being at NBC, especially in that department. I loved it. But then I realized, like anything else, is a business. Every year there were layoffs at the same time. The reason they contracted people was because they knew they were able to let them go. And if they came back, then they came back and you did that and they were fine. Uh, and then from NBC, I ended up going to a place. Then I went to the agency side again. And I went to work at Wild Child. It was a production house. Very talented owner. She was great. Uh, you know, Also, I stood there maybe 6 to 8 months, maybe, because I didn't find that atmosphere that I was looking for, that I wanted to create. So I was beginning to believe that I was never going to find it. And then while working at Wild Child, I get a call from the owner of Audio Engine, Bob Giamarco. He said, hey, and it turns out that Wild Child and A&E had a business relationship. They would do the audio for them. They had an audio room at Wild Child that was run by Audio Engine. By coincidence, Bob was managing Eastside Audio at the time when I was at Eastside Audio. We connected again. And we spoke, and he said, instead of leaving the business, why don't you come and run Audio Engine for me? His person that was running it was leaving. Since he's in Arizona, he has a division of it. He asked me, he goes, hey, why don't you just run this for me? And do what you think is best and try to keep what we can. Another rough road, and another rough road. Audio Engine was known as, having these great audio engineers doing this great work. They had 2 floors. At one point, they went down to 1 floor. And we tried. Tom Goldblatt turned out to be one of the last, audio engineers there. Very highly respected, very well known. And, the business changed. The business just changed. And that was, I think that was the end run for me, was Audio Engine. Even though I did a couple of things after that, contract wise, like I was post supervisor for Latin Morons for History of Latin Morons by John Leguizamo.
Okay.
I was a post supervisor for that for Netflix to get that on air. I did that with a company called the Boathouse. Real talented guy that ran it. He just, we met and he goes, hey, why don't you be the post supervisor for this for me? It's like, sure. Tell me what you need and I'll get it done. That was fun.
Yeah.
And I got a phone call from Netflix after doing that, but they wanted me to move to LA.
Oh.
That was, I wanted that gig.
Yeah.
I so wanted that. I mean, Netflix. So how could you not, right?
Right.
How could you not? But I couldn't bring myself to say that I could uplift my family and go.
Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow.
That was a really tough pill to swallow. So at the end of it, I think what did it for me at the end was I couldn't find a space where I could be me. And then I learned throughout that whole process what made me me. And it's the people that I surrounded myself with. I was nothing great. I was nothing different than what I saw. But I could never find that space. And that hurt. It hurts today, And then, you know what? As we got along, COVID hit. Luckily enough, I did a couple of side jobs or whatever the case was, but nothing crazy. But and then towards the midst of COVID, which we said we would get into, is, I started applying for jobs again in the business. And that's where then you and I crossed paths. We had a conversation because I had this idea for a while. And we this is where we are today.
Yeah. That literally you and I are now in the same same boat.
We definitely are in the same boat, but we definitely made this happen. It's the universe has spoken in so many ways. It sounds cheesy, it sounds weird, but we've always crossed paths in these 25 years of being in both sides of the business.
Yeah.
We know the same people in so many different ways, right? You work for Jeff Kreiner, so he was your boss. I know Jeff Kreiner and I know him kind of personally, right? I never worked with him at CBS. I worked for him at National and at Sonic. Chris McHale, never worked with him. I just know him personally, you know?
Right.
I can't imagine the people we may, know through BBDO. But you and I have a friendship that's kind of weird also. Right? We met each other briefly for a short period of time at National.
Yeah.
You left, you went to CBS, you went to McCann, you went to McHale Barone, then you were at BBDO. Somehow or other, through all that, we always connected through LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey,
yeah, when it
you hear anything, do you find, because that's what you do, right? If you know people in the business or whatever, and we always had that communication, which was weird.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, I always, especially with people that I believe that I started with in the business, they're always top of mind for me as far as like if there's any opportunities out there. It's if I can help somebody that I started with, that's huge for me,
Of course. Yeah, I mean, I think but it's also funny because we really didn't know each other.
No. Not very well anyway.
Right. Not, I could say in the last few months, we've beginning to know each other, right? And people may say, so how the hell these two guys are getting together and doing a podcast? Right? The last person you would think. Why would you think this?
Because we have a lot in common.
It's amazing how different our roads have been, but we've crossed the same path. Like we intertwine one way or another.
Yeah.
And sort of hit the same roadblocks and all that. But right now, I think the main goal for us is we're going to do it. We're going to do it right. And we're going to take our experiences and we're going to bring people to this platform that we're doing to showcase what they have, bring concerns. We want to open this wide open to just not a reminiscing thing, but to what's going on currently in the business, what we know from our point of view. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but we know what we see.
Yeah.
And I think the whole point of this is that.
Yeah. So that's probably a good point for us to finish this episode. And just a little bit of a preview for the next episode. We're going to start diving into our experiences interviewing for jobs and what we've had to deal with, what we're noticing, and have a discussion as to, is this the new normal when it comes to interviewing and showing your worth to a company? So episode 2, I think, is in the books. Ray, this was a good one.
Yes, sir.
And hope everybody checks us out on the next one.
Yeah, look, we're going to be putting this out. We're going to put it out, and we're going to get better and better and more comfortable at this as we go. So we're going to book this one, and then hopefully we don't have to release any, but we'll go with that. But I think this is a good one, Chris.
Agreed. See you, everybody.